The decathlon. It's the ultimate test for an athlete. 10 events in 30 hours. It's a tremendous grind, not only physically, but also psychologically. Pressure even when you're resting. You're thinking, always thinking about that next event, and then the next. There is a strong American tradition in the decathlon, and it dates all the way back to the days of Jim Thorpe. And tonight we have an American favorite. The latest in the line, his name is Dave Johnson. He's the first guy in a long time to be competitive internationally. And recently he had the opportunity to get some pointers in the event from some of the history's all-time greats. America has a tradition of great decathlon champions dating back to 1952, when Bob Mathias won the gold medal at the Helsinki Olympics. Milt Campbell continued that tradition at the 56 Olympics in Melbourne, Australia, and in his footsteps followed the 1960 gold medalist Rafer Johnson. In 1968, Bill Toomey earned the title of the world's greatest athlete after winning the gold at the Mexico City Olympics. But America's last Olympic gold medalist in this event was Bruce Jenner, who scored a record-breaking number of points in Montreal in 1976.
Well, you know, the United States used to own the decathlon. Now we can't even lease it. The decathlon is not glorified except for once every 4 years, so it's sort of ignored.
We live in a society of specialization, and the business world is specialized, so is the athletic world. The decathlon sort of goes against that grain.
The other reason, I believe, too, is we're so heavy in pro sports here.
Whatever the reasons, the trend is now reversing with the emergence of Dave Johnson, the American most likely to claim the title world's greatest athlete. And at this special workshop, Johnson and other budding decathletes had a chance to meet their predecessors. It was also a chance to empathize about the rigors of training.
Power events are hard to do early in the morning.
Especially, I think, it's cold days, not putting the cold days.
It was an opportunity for the old to educate the young.
The discus is too low, coming out too low.
And a chance for the young to educate the old.
I don't know, I used to take my foot up off the ground. I'm not sure if that's legal, though.
Yeah, they make
Because you dug holes in those days.
Also, it was an opportunity for the older generation to relive the glories of their youth.
Guys say, let's get a light shot, like an 8-pound shot, and throw it 55 feet. We'll scare them to death.
This program is one of the many efforts being made to restore the American athletes to their former greatness in this event. An effort that also includes some of the most sophisticated technology sports medicine can offer, like these elaborate videotaping systems and timing mechanisms. But while the technology offers some insight, it cannot give these men the psychological edge they need to be competitive. And this is where their predecessors can offer priceless support.
Are you prepared to lie in a hospital bed to recover from an injury? Are you prepared to hurt when you work out? Are you prepared to be beaten because you know you're not ready? Are you prepared to continue when everybody is telling you no? Are you prepared? Are you committed? And do you have the opinion that you can be the best? And I think when you get to that point, then you got a shot.
The USA provided 10 of the first 14 Olympic champs in the decathlon. A guy from Moscow's ahead, though, now. Moscow, Idaho, that is. And out at Husky Stadium is our Bob Neal.
Thank you, Hannah. We're ready to give you a report on what's happening with the decathlon. It's been taking place since this afternoon. Several of the events are completed now. Let's first of all set the standard for you and look at the world record in the decathlon. Daley Thompson of Great Britain holds that at 8,847 points. Dwight Stones has been following the competition this afternoon. Dwight, bring us up to date.
Well, in the 100 meters, Bob, the conditions here have been horrible. Much cooler than we've had all weekend long, and the wind was right up the home stretch, and we already know the track isn't particularly fast. We only had 2 athletes go under 11 seconds for 100 meters. One of those athletes was Dan O'Brien, who ran 10.99 after running 10.40 at the TAC Championship, so that got the points in a situation where we're not probably going to be looking at records. However, after that, Dan O'Brien went down to his best event, an event in which he holds the world decathlon best. He set that best at the TAC Championships when he jumped 26.4½ in the long jump to extend his huge lead toward his second best ever first day total in history. Here on his second attempt of the afternoon, he jumps 25.11½ and gets right back up close to where he was just last month in Norwalk. Then, the American champion, three-time American champion, Dave Johnson. He jumped 6'8 3/4 to try and keep pace with Dan O'Brien, who had had an excellent shot put. And here is his third and final attempt at 6'9 3/4, a height that O'Brien had already made. Luckily for Johnson, O'Brien did not clear higher, so he did not stay too far behind. He's still almost 300 points behind as we get ready for the next and last event of the first day, the 400 meters. Back up to you, Bob.
All right, Dwight, let's take a look at how they stand here. And Dan O'Brien, Medved from the Soviet Union, and Bockburger in third. You see Johnson. We had updated you on that a little bit earlier about what's going on in the decathlon. And we're about to pick up, there'll be two heats here in the 400 meter. We'll highlight one of them and call the other one for you coming up here in just a moment. The results after 4 events. Danny O'Brien of the United States in first place with 35.79. Mikhail Medved of the Soviet Union with 33.61. Bockburger is in third place, and Dave Johnson is in fourth place. Now, Dave Johnson is a good second-day competitor, so don't count him out there because he's in fourth place right now. We're almost ready. Dwight Stones is going to join Craig and I. We're almost ready for the first heat of the 2 that'll be run here with Huff, Terekhov, Thorson, and Medved, who's pretty strong in this event, Dwight.
No doubt about that, Bob. This is obviously the second heat. Some of the other athletes that would have been competing all day long today. But these conditions, again, have not improved. It's a little bit less breezy than it was, but it's still cool, and these guys are at the end of a very, very long day. Good scores, or great scores, that is, are really out the window in this decathlon at this point in time. It's going to be a very, very competitive 400, and it's going to set up a very competitive second day of competition.
All right, here are the lanes for the first heat for the men's 400 meters. Huff, Terekhov, Thorson, Narazov, and Medved are the competitors, lanes 3 through 7.
Medved is at a real disadvantage by being all the way out in lane 7. He's the man who's in second place in the decathlon so far, and he has no one to pull off of. He's out there on his own. His worst nightmare, of course, would be that someone would catch him, make up the stagger on him, then he'd have somebody to run against.
Medved wears number 160. This is the 400 meters. You just saw the 400 meters for the Goodwill Games moments ago. This is the decathlon 400 meters. There will be 2 heats in this one. Dave Johnson and Danny O'Brien are in the heat that will come up in just a moment.
Medved has been passed by Starbutsov, his teammate, so he is running a very poor 400 meters. In this cool temperature, Dwight, it seems very, very difficult challenge for these athletes to run a fast 400 meters.
The end of a very long day. They're tired. This is an important event for everyone. They're straining for every last hundredth of a second. Of course, the athletes running against the clock, running against the table, not just each other, but the positioning of the lanes is somewhat of an advantage for some athletes and a disadvantage for others as they start to sit down and reassess what they feel like at the end of this very long day.
So the first heat is history here. Medved did not perform well. He wore number 160. You see Medved out there on the outside. Matter of fact, you don't even see him on the outside as he loses to his countryman in the men's 400 meter. That was Narazov, who was the winner of the men's 400 meters in the first heat.
Here again, a replay, and of course, I always say that the 400 meters, every time you run it, you're exploring unknown physiological territory because you're like a human experiment. You never know what's going to be there when you get to the home stretch. That's what makes it such a tough event. And you can see good lift there by Narazov at the closing meters. He's gaining, trying to stretch out for every little bit of turf he can because every little second and millisecond counts in this event on the point tables.
Speaking of point tables, Dwight, join us here with Craig as you take a look at Narazov, the winner of that heat. Let's talk a little bit about what it means to get points in this in terms of winning the decathlon. As we take a look at our table here, it'll give you an idea and a bit of an example of what a world-class competitor would get. Say 45 seconds would give you 1,060 points in the decathlon. Dwight, talk about that just a bit.
Well, the decathlon record is by Bill Toomey, of all people, from 1968. And of course, it was altitude there, and he ran a 45.3 400 meters in that decathlon. But these decathletes in these conditions, anywhere under 49 seconds in the mid-48s will be good. In fact, Dan O'Brien has a better personal best than Dave Johnson. But at the TAC Championships last month, Dave Johnson actually ran a superior time in the 400 to Dan O'Brien and closed the gap that was between them by a little bit. He got this point score under a 300-point gap, which is about right where they are right now. Dan O'Brien has a 291-point lead in first place over fourth place Dave Johnson. So Dave Johnson has to come out here and get as close to Dan O'Brien or try to beat him or run a faster time in his 400-meter heat to try and close a little bit more of that gap, because he's such an outstanding second-day competitor. He needs to have as much of an advantage as he possibly can at the end of the first day.
Also in this second heat will be Sheldon Bockburger of the USA, who won his heat in the 100 meters. So we've got some pretty good sprinters coming up here from the United States in this heat. It's O'Brien in lane 1, Medved, they're saying now in lane 2. Not exactly sure. That's after 4 events, excuse me, the standings. It's O'Brien, almost had them in lanes. First place is Danny O'Brien. Medved is in second place, and Bockburger in third. In the lanes, we'll go to that in just a moment.
Well, I think Dan O'Brien should be a good 400-meter runner, Dwight. You know, at the Oregon State High School Championships, he was competing for Henley High. He's from Klamath Falls, Oregon. He won 4 different events, the 110 hurdles, the 300 hurdles, the long jump, and the 100 meters. If anybody should run a good 400, it's this guy.
Well, you can see by the lane draw, Dave Johnson's gotten a real advantage here. He's the most inside. He's in lane 3, so the turn is not all that tight. He's not all that tall anyway, but now he gets to key off of Dan O'Brien and Sheldon Bockburger, both good 400-meter runners. He can see what Dan O'Brien's going to do. If he sees him start to tie, that might give him a little extra inspiration, a little extra energy to really go for it in this 400. And he knows that he ran a better 400 at the TAC Championship at the end of the first day. And of course, Dan O'Brien had a phenomenal first day at the TAC Championship, scoring the second best first day total ever, only 21 points behind Daley Thompson, who of course is maybe the greatest decathlete who's ever lived. Dan O'Brien's not having that kind of a career day thanks in part to the conditions here, but he's still having a very solid first day, and he's looking to run a strong 400 closer to his personal best so that he can maintain the gap that he has over the field, but more importantly, over the great second day competitor, Dave Johnson.
There's Danny O'Brien right now. You saw the sign, DJ and OB. Got some fans here in Seattle.
Well, as the piece showed earlier, the decathlon is on the way back in the United States. A very specific effort by a number of coaches, including Fred Samara from Princeton University, to bring the focus back on this event, to make America #1 again in the decathlon, and it's paying off. They brought together, as we saw, all the great decathletes of the past to advise these guys, to tell them how to organize their lives, because, as I said yesterday in talking about Jackie Joyner-Kersey, it's Daley Thompson that says the 10 events of the decathlon are like 10 jealous girlfriends pulling at you different ways. Hard to concentrate on any one because the disciplines are so different. Mike, Dwight, I was wondering about Michael Smith from Canada, who has the fastest personal best of any of these guys, 47.63. He hasn't looked on top of his game today.
No, all day long he has looked a little bit off. In the 100 meters, of course, no one had a great time, but Mike Smith didn't seem to really be on top of his game. He's almost a 7-foot high jumper, and he was looking very poor in the intermediate heights around 6'8" and 6'9". His long jump was not particularly good, so if he's looking to make up some points here and try to get back in this competition, he's going to have to do it here. And again, that will help Dave Johnson, because Mike Smith, being a good 400-meter runner, he can relax a little bit and draw off of Mike Smith's fast early pace.
Once again, the standings after 4 events. O'Brien in first place, followed by Medved of the Soviet Union, Bockburger in third, and Johnson in fourth place. That's the standings after 4 events in the decathlon. They just concluded the introductions here in the lanes. The lanes with Dave Johnson in lane 3, Mike Smith in 5, Danny O'Brien in 6, and Sheldon Bockburger, as we told you, who won his heat in the 100 meters, is a good sprinter in the 100 meters for sure. We may see him get out to an early lead here as we're ready for the 400 meters second heat in the decathlon from Husky Stadium. There is Danny O'Brien, adopted at the age of 2. Had trouble when he was in college, was a troubled young man, lived, as he called it, a wild life. He said he got his act together so he could do this, so he's really quite a heartwarming story to be in this situation here, competing with the best in the world, the men's 400 meters.
He's a man on a mission, and as he runs down the backstretch, Dwight, he seems to be out very, very quickly.
He looks the best in this field, as we discussed. Mike Smith looking a little bit better now, but Dave Johnson has to stay on the pace. He's got to not allow Dan O'Brien to make up too much distance on this stagger, but Dan O'Brien looks outstanding out there in lane 6.
Danny O'Brien in first place.
I'll tell you, Mike Smith was all over the line on the inside of his lane around that turn. I don't see a flag up, but he could be in danger of disqualification.
Mike Smith coming on very strong. We'll keep an eye on whether or not he will be. Mike Smith pulling out now. Danny O'Brien holding on. Here comes Dave Johnson. It's going to be Mike Smith, Danny O'Brien, and Dave Johnson was very close there for third place, but Mike Smith gets the victory.
Excellent run for him. Unofficially only 3/100ths off his personal best, and Johnson and O'Brien in the mid-48. So Johnson having an excellent run, probably better than his personal best.
Mike Smith with a good come from behind, Dwight Stones.
Well, he started very, very slow on that backstretch, and Dan O'Brien took it out so quickly that he looked to be shutting down the entire field. There is no red flag on that far turn, as I can see now. Of course, that scoreboard is in the way, but Mike Smith, an outstanding run in 400 meters.
So Mike Smith gets the victory there in lane 2 from Husky Stadium. The 2 heats from the men's 400 meters event in the decathlon. Event, Daley Thompson of Great Britain holding the world record at 8,847 points. The American record held by Bruce Jenner in the men's decathlon. The first day events happened yesterday, and Danny O'Brien from the University of Idaho Vandals came on very strong and was the man who was leading coming into today's competition. So let's have a look at how things stacked up yesterday after the first day's competition, after 5 events took place. Danny O'Brien, as I said, was the man who led everything at the end of the day with 4,470 points. Sheldon Bockburger was second in the United States. Michael Smith of Canada was third. Dave Johnson, a good second-day competitor, was fourth, and Mikhail Medved of the Soviet Union was fifth. Now, 3 events have been completed here today. Dwight Stones is track and field side to bring us up to date. Dwight?
Well, Bob, we were looking for Dave Johnson to make a very big move here today, and that is exactly what's happened. But Danny O'Brien is having a very solid second day, unlike the kind of day he had at the TAC Championships back in June, where his second day really fell apart on him. In the very first event of the second day, the 110-meter hurdles, Dan O'Brien in Heat 2, running a very credible time here. He ran 14:03 wind-aided at the TAC Championships. He runs 14.44 here and maintains his lead on the field. Just so happens that Dave Johnson had a very solid hurdles race of his own, but really didn't gain any ground. Now, Mikhail Medved, we saw him yesterday coasting in the 400 meters, thought he maybe had given up on any chance of being in the thick of things. Not true whatsoever, as is indicated here. Third and final throw in the men's discus. He's a very good thrower. He had an excellent shot put mark yesterday, 162 feet 9 inches, and he is still very much in the thick of things. Now, the swing event, as Dave Johnson called it here, the pole vault, the third event of the second day. Dan O'Brien only jumping 14:1 at the TAC Championships. Here, he had cleared 14:11. His third and final jump at 15:3, technically just not there, but a personal best in the pole vault for Dan O'Brien in the decathlon, and he was able to maintain a lead here. Now, Dave Johnson told me yesterday, Dwight, I'm jumping 17 feet tomorrow. I'm going to make the big move in the pole vault. He's an excellent pole vaulter and an excellent javelin thrower. That's where he really shut the door on Dan O'Brien at TAC. This is Johnson's attempt at 16 feet 2 3/4 inches, his very first attempt, and watch how much room he has to spare. You would think with that kind of clearance he would have jumped 17 feet, but he cleared no higher. So he didn't make as big a move here as he had at the TAC Championship. Mikhail Medved, once again, a good high jumper, a good pole vaulter, a good discus thrower, a good shot putter. His third attempt at 16 6 3/4, and he sneaks over 1,500 meters. And he is very, very happy. I bet he wonders why he didn't run the 400 meters any faster or any harder than he did yesterday, Bob Neal.
And after 8 events, Danny O'Brien continues in first place, but everything getting tight. Look at how close it is. The top 4, O'Brien, Medved, Dave Johnson, and Michael Smith. And the competitors are now throwing the javelin. Later, we will carry the 1,500 meter, which could decide this tight competition.
Mikhail Medved, as we said before, coasting in the 400 at the end of yesterday's final event, the 400. Didn't look like he was that interested. Has really had a great second day. Here he is on his second throw in the javelin. A good thrower, a good jumper is Medved. And on this second throw, personal best 2:05.5 for Medved, puts him right in the thick of things with just the one event, the 1500 left. Now, Dave Johnson is an excellent javelin thrower. This is where he really put Dan O'Brien away at the TAC Championship. Between the vault and the javelin, he made up all of the points that he needed and then some. This is his third and final throw. He saves the best for last. 225-foot 3-inch personal best in the javelin throw for Dave Johnson, and this is a race that is tightening considerably. Now, by contrast, Dan O'Brien, who had a phenomenal first day, is a horrible javelin thrower. He improved by almost a foot in the pole vault, so didn't allow Johnson to really close the door on him. But his javelin throw, even though he throws close to a personal best here, throws 188 feet 4 inches. His personal best is only 190 feet, some 35 feet behind Johnson. That is a big swing going into the last event, the 1500. It is going to be a tight race for all the 4 top spots as we get ready to head into that 10th and final event, Bob.
There, after 9 events, you see the standings. It is very close. Danny O'Brien with a narrow lead over Dave Johnson and Mikhail Medved and Mike Smith. So that means when we look at the 1500 meters that'll be coming up here shortly, it will be crucial to the decathlon event. And Johnson at 76.33 and Mikhail Medved at 76.22. Craig Mosbach, this 1500 meters, less than a minute away now, is going to determine the winner.
Well, this is every decathlete's nightmare to have the event come down to the 1500 meters. Even the guys behind who now have a chance to win it on this race are saying to themselves, I don't train specifically for this event. Usually decathletes always put the 1500 at the bottom of the list in terms of what they train for, figuring that the technical events, the javelin, the pole vault that are so difficult should get more of their time. And now it comes down to this. Who is the fittest for a 1500 meters?
Who is? What is the opportunity here? O'Brien's in first place, Johnson second, Medved third, Smith fourth. What about this? Who's strongest in that group in this event?
Well, Smith is the fastest 1500 meter runner in the field, but he's so far behind it's unlikely that he can catch up. The most interesting situation is that Johnson, if he runs 4 seconds faster than O'Brien, will win the decathlon.
1500 meters is underway in the decathlon. Dwight Stone's also watching this. Dwight, you're down field side. What are your thoughts about this competition?
Well, these athletes have to be careful. The ones that are in contention have to be careful how much effort they use in these first couple of laps. It's so tight between Johnson, O'Brien, and Mikhail Medved, and their personal bests are somewhat relative to each other. It would assume on paper that Dave Johnson would win the battle between these three because he has a superior personal best to both O'Brien and Medved, but depends on how tired these athletes are from the effort they have put out over the last couple of days. There's no question about the fact that they are tired. It's just a matter of, can Dave Johnson beat Dan O'Brien by 3.5 plus seconds? Can O'Brien stay in contact enough with Johnson to make sure that that gap between them is not, say, 30 meters? And that is really the key here. And Mikhail Medved, what's going to happen with him is he is in 5th place right now, being very conservative with his effort. The scores are out the window as far as great scores. This is a competition, and the 3 that you see in 3rd, 4th, and 5th are the guys that really have to score in this event to determine the winner. Dave Johnson in 3rd place right now. Dan O'Brien right behind him, doesn't want to let him get away. Mikhail Medved letting that pack of 4 sort of get away from him.
And Roman Terekhov of the Soviet Union has moved into first place ahead of Mike Smith of Canada right now. Terekhov, fastest personal best in the field of 4:13.67, is leading. Minute 31 in. We have just over 2 laps remaining. Dave Johnson, Dan O'Brien are 3rd and 4th.
Right, it looks as if Medved is running in the same fashion that he ran the 400 meters. In other words, not running at all. He seems to be conceding any chance of winning this to Dan O'Brien and Dave Johnson.
No question about it, Craig. It's as if he could just run 8 events, or just contest 8 events and throw out the 400 and the 1500, the events that end each of the 2 days, he'd be much happier because now he has fallen way off the pace, and Dave Johnson is starting to put some distance between himself and Dan O'Brien. He's going with Mike Smith and Terekhov, who have superior 1,500-meter times to them. Dan O'Brien has got to stay within contact, within striking distance of Dave Johnson, so he can keep the gap at the finish line to under 35 meters.
And we have less than 2 laps to go now. You see 1, 2, and 3. It's Terekhov, who is not in the running for the decathlon title. Mike Smith, Dave Johnson, and Dan O'Brien not in the picture. O'Brien trying to keep in touch with the top 3. Dave Johnson in 3rd place, Smith 2nd, and Terekhov is in 1st place, coming up on about a lap and a half to go in the 1,500 meters.
O'Brien only ran 4 minutes and 43 seconds at the TAC Championships, and there Dave Johnson actually ran faster, 4:35. So maybe this year, although their personal bests would be more or less similar, Dwight, it's Dave Johnson who has a better 1,500-meter time this year.
So right now it's Roman Terekhov of the Soviet Union. He's in 1st place. Remember, he's not in competition with these top finishers in the decathlon. Mike Smith is in 2nd place, Dave Johnson, and then Dan O'Brien. Can Dan O'Brien make a move? We have 1 lap to go. Dave Johnson with about a 50-meter lead or more on Danny O'Brien for the final lap. The bell is sounded.
Well, I'm checking the time, and it's 6-second lead, which is enough for Johnson to overtake Dan O'Brien, and the gap is widening with every stride. So it looks as if the experience of Dave Johnson, the man who said he was overwhelmed by the enormity of the 1988 Olympics, is going to carry him to the Goodwill Games title.
Dave Johnson looking much better than Dan O'Brien. Dan O'Brien has pretty much given up the fight. Mikhail Medved now making a move on Dan O'Brien. Dave Johnson very smartly not trying to go with Terekhov or Mike Smith, who have much superior 1,500-meter times. It appears as though all Johnson has to do is finish smoothly, not allow himself to tie up, and he has this in the bag.
Coming down the home stretch now, jumping out in 1st place again is Roman Terekhov. Mike Smith is in 2nd place, then Dave Johnson, and then Danny O'Brien. Into the home stretch. It's going to be Roman Terekhov of the Soviet Union with the victory. That will not influence the finish of the decathlon champion, though Mike Smith is 2nd. Coming in 3rd is Dan O'Brien, and here's the important timing for Danny O'Brien, but Danny O'Brien is way back there behind Dan Johnson. Dave Johnson, excuse me.
Very impressive finish for Dave Johnson, right around his personal best in the event. What a time to have it. Last year he won the World University Games. Now he comes up with a big 1,500 meters, around 4:26, right behind his personal best, to win the Goodwill Games decathlon.
Well, it came down to the final event, the 1,500 meters. Danny O'Brien, who led yesterday and who's been quite a comeback story after a lot of personal problems with his young life, his wild life, as he calls it, getting himself in shape for the decathlon as the Americans are trying to get back into the world picture in the decathlon. And that man, Dave Johnson, with the gold medal will make a statement for the American decathletes. Dwight Stones, your thoughts on this 1,500 meter and the decathlon that Dave Johnson has just won?
Well, Dave Johnson very methodically chipped away at Dan O'Brien's lead all day long. He didn't have the big swing in the pole vault like he had at TAC Championships. He did have a huge gap, or make a huge gap in the Javelin. He knew what he had to do in the 1,500. He intelligently ran with the leaders early on so that he didn't have to do too much work. You can see here everything he has left. He's pretty sure at this point in time that he's done what he has to do. Excellently well-developed second day. He's a strong second-day competitor. And Dan O'Brien was able to finish close enough to Mikhail Medved that he held on to 2nd place. Dan O'Brien's got to be happy. He had some good events today, the 2nd day. He just needs to work on his pole vault and his javelin throw. And the duo of Dave Johnson and Dan O'Brien could both exceed Bruce Jenner's American record in the next couple of years. I'm sure of it.
And there is Danny O'Brien. Just imagine this, 9 events in the 2 days, and the last one, the 10th event, is just 100 meters short of running a mile. And Danny O'Brien ran out of gas.
Well, he said after the first day yesterday that he was having a real hard time concentrating. He said, well, normally when I compete in the decathlon, the stands are empty. This time, every eye is on me. Everyone's watching me. I'm not used to that. This will help me mature as a decathlete. I think it's an outstanding performance for both athletes. And Dave Johnson, who scored over 8,400 points in these conditions, an outstanding competition.
Dave Johnson, the gold medal winner in the decathlon of the Goodwill Games of 1990. The decathlon standings just concluded a moment ago with the 1,500 meters, and Dave Johnson, who who was the favorite, came from behind, as was predicted by Dwight Stones and Craig Masbach, to win with 8,403 points. Danny O'Brien finished second, and Dave Sims is with both of the competitors.
Thank you, Bob Neal. Two of America's best here at the Goodwill Games, running 1 and 2 gold medal, silver medal. And Dave Johnson, tell us about your run in the 1500.
Well, I guess I was scared to death at the start. I didn't know what was going to happen. Dan's a good runner, great competitor, and I knew he wanted to win. So I guess I just had to stick to my game plan and run what I thought I could do. And it turned out to put me on top this time.
Did a good job breaking away from him, breaking some contact, too.
Thank you very much.
What about you, Dan? It looked like you were a lot of struggling for you in that race.
Well, Fred Samara before the race told me just to relax and really just try to, you know, look at his back and just follow him. On that third lap, I tightened up a little bit. I had a hard time relaxing. That's when he did break away from me. But I had a good 300 finish, and it was just too bad that I let him get that distance ahead of me.
Now, America seems to, especially with you two guys, having a resurgence in the decathlon. Talk about that for a second.
Well, yeah, we definitely have a big surgence, and it's a lot of it for myself is due to a lot of hard work through the USOC and TAC. They've been helping me ever since 1985 when I really decided to take the decathlon seriously. And without the help of other people such as Fred Samara, who heads the Decathlon Foundation here in the United States, it would never happen. It would never happen without the help of TAC and USOC. And this year, Visa put their foot in the door and decided to help the decathlon program, and boom, here we are. We're doing real well. And I think these meets, the TAC USA Championships, and this meet need to be ranked very high in the world because the best competition was here.
Oh, Danny, what about it? When are you going to catch him?
Well, excuse me?
When are you going to be able to catch this guy now?
I think I'll be able to catch him when I can finally put my events together. I'm really new to this event. I've really only been, you know, in it real serious for a year. As soon as I get more consistent in the last 3 events on the second day, I'll be able to just hang with Dave, no problem.
Gentlemen, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Back to Bob Neal.